From his home in suburban Melbourne, no man has done more for the football collectibles market than Rick Milne. While the knowledgeable dealer has a deep love of the game and memorabilia, he is the first stop for those interested in collecting anything to do with football.
Now I'm going to show you a few of the things that come through our auction rooms almost every day. As an example, Jerry G. Now, he's a little ventriloquist doll, very popular in Victoria, not too many other places, but certainly in Victoria, done by a fellow called Ron Blaskett, used to be a big TV star. And to find a Jerry G in a football outfit is extremely hard. Very rare to find him in a footy jumper. And these usually sell on the order of $1,000, maybe $1,500. Extremely rare. So that's Jerry G. The most collectible footy club is, as it happens, is Essendon. And there is, it's actually a glass that had honey in it originally, Greg's honey. And the idea was, of course, after you've used the honey, you use the glass as a drinking glass. Now, eventually, most of those would wear off as you washed them in the sink, and these little pieces would peel off. As a result, today, a glass like that sells for somewhere up around the $100 mark. But Essendon is the most collectible club, as it happens. Another one of my... I find a lot of collectors of the footy fixtures. In other words, each year they put out these little fixtures and tell you which teams are playing which on which days, and lots of advertisers. This one is for Foster's Lager, as it happens, but there are lots and lots of these done, and there are people who collect just those footy fixtures, so they are a pretty unusual little piece. There were lots of footy magazines, especially back in the 40s and so, rather modest looking, but they give details of the longest kick and the best players and the Brownlow medalists and who were the premiers for the last 30 years and 40 years and so forth. And those little books from the 40s, not very attractive to look at, but nonetheless, for the older collector in particular, they seem to sell quite well at around about $20, $25, something like that. A later version of the same thing, you might say. This is from 1962, put out by the Herald, which is a Melbourne publication. Football, what they call a privilege book, and it cost at the time just a few shillings. Today sells for about $25 to $35 and very collectible. Lots of people looking for those. Popular, but not really expensive. You used to be able to buy, although you aren't able to anymore, pennants at the football games, where people used to stand inside the ground and walk around before the game and sell these pennants, which people used to wave. It must have looked very strange, but they have pennants, especially around the finals time, and that's a very lovely one from the Collingwood Football Club, and worth today somewhere about $100, maybe $150. Good piece. Coca-Cola is very collectible in its own right, but when it has a football theme as well, it tends to double the prices, because you find people who collect Coca-Cola want to buy an item like this, and people who collect football things want this as well. This is put out in the Geelong area only, and it features Geelong footballers of the day. This is sort of early to mid-1950s, and it's pretty roughly put in, as you can see, but very rare, very hard to find the whole set, and it's a very unusual little book. They did 3 of them only, and all during the 1950s. This is 1957, this is a 57 version, and that, I reckon, in complete condition, somewhere about $300, $400, maybe even $500 if you found the right person. Membership cards are all the rage, and this is a rather lovely one from the old South Melbourne Club, now Sydney Swans. This is from 1958, and every year, as it happens, South Melbourne changed their design, so everyone is different, unlike, for example, Collingwood, which is exactly the same every single year. But those are very collectible, and from a non-premiership year, they start at about $15 or $20, maybe $25. If it's a premiership year, you can multiply that by a factor of 4 or 5. So the year when a team won a premiership is always much more valuable. That's the little membership cards. These were done during about the 1940s. You can usually tell from the length of the shorts, and they're the old-time long shorts. And this is a really lovely little sort of a statuette that was made, and it's of a Melbourne player taking the ball. I've had about half a dozen of other clubs, and they always sell very well, sell extremely well at around about $400, maybe $450. And if it's the team you really want, maybe you'd pay a little bit more for it as well. So that's a lovely piece. The teams used to go away on trips interstate, and Victoria would play South Australia, and South Australia would play Queensland, and so it went. And this is one of the programs from one of those games, a souvenir program, and it was probably given to a player to tell him where they had to be on what time and so forth. So it's got a little program in there as well, and the names of the players who are in the comp as well. So those are, again, quite a nice little addition to any sort of collection, and they usually start at somewhere about $30, maybe $35. Very nice piece. This is rather lovely. This came as a little jug, and so it was sort of like a water jug, and some little cups that go with it, which I don't have with this one, but that shows, again, real 1940s style. That's a Footscray team, and they've got the longer shorts and such. And as a set, and by the way, at the back, if you can see that, it's sort of got the little football lace-up bar at the back, so it's sort of like a footy a bit in a way. And that, with these little glasses, these little cups that go with it, would sell for about $300, maybe $400. Hard to find, though. Couple more. But for a number of years when the grand finals were on, they put out records of the last quarter, of the last half of the grand final. The old LP record, as this one is. In the earlier days, they actually put them out on 78s as well. It's very funny. I've actually heard one of these where they go into the rooms after the game. It was the 1940s. And they said to the players of the winning team, "Oh, how do you feel?" And the player said, "Oh, pretty good. You know, we're very pleased to have won." Not like today. You know, it was quite a different way of approaching it in those times. These are hard to find. This is put out on W&G, which is a famous Australian label, and limited distribution at the time. These sell today for about somewhere between $102 to $100 a piece. Run $100 to $200. This is a little representative card from these two players from one club went to play for Victoria in one of the interstate games. Chicken Smallhorn and Hayden Bunton from Fitzroy, two of the most famous players who ever played. Hayden Bunton, certainly the most famous player, won 3 Brownlow medals. Really interesting, nice little piece, and worth somewhere about a couple of $300. And speaking of Hayden Bunton, there is also a lovely picture of him. This came from a lady who had been his landlady. He actually lived with the lady, and he'd given it to her before he left her house when he was living with her back in the 1930s. One last piece is this mighty old footy jumper from the Fitzroy Footy Club, back in the old days when they had quite a different colour scheme to today, the Brisbane wears with the yellow and so forth, and it was worn by a player. We've got all the details on the player, and we had that in a recent auction, and it sold for somewhere about $250. So finding a footy jumper, especially if it's been worn by a player from the team, they usually sell somewhere around about that sort of a price, $200, $250. Maybe more if he'd played in a premiership, which this guy didn't.
From blazers of the 50s through to modern-day treasures, from past grand final heroes to modern-day medicos, they have one thing in common. If it has a unique football flavour, they are keen to give it a home. They are the Collectors.